Welcome to my workshop. I have on the floor next to me every piece of Draven, every piece of the costume waiting to be explained to you. I'm going to go through the whole costume and show you what it's made of, what it looks like up close, kind of go through how I made it. I don't have patterns for everything, but for the things I still have patterns for, I'll show them to you. And hopefully you can learn something, even if you're not making this character in particular. I'd love to be helpful in some way, or maybe you can just put me on while you're crafting and I can help keep you company. Here we go. So the first thing I do with basically every project is I print out my references and put them in my reference binder, and then do a like a brain dump of either issues I'm concerned about or materials I want to use, basically getting my initial thoughts about the costume out of the way. I'll start with the greaves. These are actually my favorite part of the whole costume. I was happy that I only ended up needing one dart for this piece, and that dart was pretty well hidden in the final piece. So the greaves are made with a base of 4mm foam. Right on top of the 4mm foam is pleather, black pleather. On top of that is 2mm details with these cutouts here. And then these spikes are actually cast from dental powder. I would not recommend doing that. They're actually very brittle. For some of the other spikes that you'll see later, I 3D modeled them and had them printed, and that worked a lot better. They're both lighter and much more durable. This is a layer of 3mm foam, just a simple shape. This layer right here is actually also foam, but it has this beautiful velveteen glued on top of it. And then the spike is, I believe, 4mm with a 2mm detail. For the boots, I did the classic saran wrap and tape method to get my pattern. Nowadays, I don't really make just foam boot covers. They just get beat up way too easily from walking around on them. So these are either 2 or 3mm foam on the inside, and then they're completely covered in black Worbla. And then these spikes right here are the 3D printed ones. I think they look a little less perfect. Like, you can definitely tell when you're close up that they are 3D printed, but they're so light and so durable that I think it's worth it. And I definitely could have put a little bit more effort into smoothing them and making them as perfect as the cast ones were. So that's the front of my boot. It attaches with 2 pieces of elastic and just slides over my boot. And then this is the heel. And it also has a piece of elastic that goes over the laces of the boot. This is the crown, the pattern for the crown. Something that I do on a lot of my patterns, especially more complex pieces, is I will write down my notes on how I want to make this thing. So like it says all layers 2mm, and then this is actually an order of how I want to attach everything. So first the lower half of the base, then the upper half of the base, then the gem. And this is just helping me like work through how I'm actually going to construct this before I start cutting and gluing pieces together. Here is the actual crown. I'd like, if I ever make an upgrade of this, I'd like to cast a gem and make it look a lot more realistic instead of just using foam and then covering it in a glossy finish. It's a simpler piece once it's all put together, but getting all the layers right did take some work. The belt buckle was another case where I wanted to really plan it out before I started construction. So I made this illustration, and then from this I made these actual pattern pieces just by tracing and cutting out and getting the different layers of foam. So what I ended up with was this, which is one of my favorite parts of the costume. I think it's really eye-catching. I love how detailed and how there are so many different layers. And I think the feathers came out really nice too. So the feathers are 2mm foam detailed with a soldering iron. The belt buckle is multiple different thicknesses of foam, probably 4, got cat hairs on it, probably 4, 6, and 2 mostly. It attaches to the belt with purse snaps. I love using purse snaps for basically anything. And then this is the first time we're seeing the teal and burgundy pleather, which will show up throughout the costume. Something I did for this costume that I haven't really had the opportunity to do before is I actually collected swatches of all of the fabrics that I would be using. Because it was a really kind of limited color scheme, but I had lots of different textures that I wanted to use, I knew I had to be careful to get colors that work together among the textures that I was using. So I have a burgundy velveteen and also the burgundy stretch pleather. So like having so many different textures but only basically 3-ish colors, I wanted to make sure that all of these were going to look cohesive and pretty. So I carried this safety pin around for quite a while there at the beginning of this project. Here are my gloves. These are the first, what are these called? Gullets? I think I'm wrong. I'll correct myself on screen. I actually did use a pattern for these. This is the only thing in the project that I used a pattern for, and I'm really glad I did because I learned a whole lot about putting together gloves. These actually, unfortunately, the cream is already stained, mostly with tattoo, the makeup that I use for my tattoo, but I'm trying not to be sad about it. They weren't easy to make. It's two really thick fabrics, and they look nice. So there's the gloves. Here's something really simple. These are my earrings. They are little worms of Worbla painted silver, and they just squeeze over my earlobes. And that's it. Easy peasy. This is my belt. This is actually where the belt buckle and front loincloth attach. It's made by strip piecing the velveteen together, so it has like a really nice texture to it. I really, really love how this looks. I also like how it makes my body look. It kind of hides my hips in a way that helps with the little bit of masculine illusion I have going on. Unfortunately, this fabric is really delicate, so I'm already getting holes in it, and like my attachments are kind of pulling through. It was really easy to make though, so I will probably just remake it if I take this to an in-person competition. I also have all of my dangly bits attached. These are all attached with purse snaps as well. These are made from the stretch burgundy pleather, and then these are just foam dowels that have been painted a dark gray. I made a lot of just strips of this burgundy stuff, and it just hangs from my waist, all of it. And it looks a little crappy right now, but all of this irons out and looks quite nice when it hasn't been in storage. The back loincloth piece, butt cloth? It's a butt cloth. Also attaches to the burgundy velveteen. This is made of the teal pleather and the burgundy pleather. With these dangly bits especially, I needed for them to be pretty on the inside as well because I knew that they'd be visible. So I'm really happy with how beautiful these ended up on the inside. I spent a lot of time sewing these, but they're pretty, especially for me, the sewing noob. These are my hip armor. This is the first time I ever quilted anything, and these actually have darts in them, so that made quilting even more difficult. You can see there's a dart right here that kind of puts a little fold in the quilting, but it's pretty well hidden, so that took a lot of work and pulling out seams on my part. This is made with the gray pleather on the outside. I did my own binding for the edges, and then on the inside I'm just using like a regular black cottony type stuff. It's not actually in the fabric swatch. This is the only place I used it. I just needed something. And then in between there is quilt batting. These strap on really easily. I have a piece of elastic in the back here, and then in the front they just snap on. And both of those are 100% hidden by the overbelt, so I don't have to worry about the hip armor attachments showing in any way, which is really nice. I love wearing this because it doesn't feel like I have to baby it at all. There's not a lot of this costume that I feel like I can just put on and act like it's clothing, but these actually are sturdy. Yay! And now for something completely different. These are my mustaches. At this point I have basically ruined these. I used eyelash glue on them the first couple times I wore them, and that stuff does not come off as far as I can tell, so I need to remake them, but I think I can make them better anyway, so I'm seeing it as an opportunity. These are, you really can't see anymore because this is just glue and latex here, it's nothing gross. But these are hand ventilated mustaches that I made myself. I spent about 30 hours on these. It should not have taken that long, but it turns out I'm very bad at hand ventilating. It's a lot harder, or at least it was for me, than it looks like on the internet. So yeah, this was a new skill for me for this project, and I'm actually really excited to get better at this, to get better at making it look realistic, to get better at attaching it to myself, to get better at making consistent knots in the ventilation. This is cool. I'm glad I did this, even though it was a butt and they are not particularly fun to wear. Well, here they are. If you followed along while I was making this project, you know that the 100% most difficult part of making Draven was making these sleeves. these are just tubes that go on the arm, and I had a really beautiful vision for these that was not just burgundy sleeves, and I couldn't do it. I tried and tried and tried. I got my machine serviced twice because I thought maybe it was my machine's fault, and I just couldn't make it happen. Still sad about that, but these work, and you know, we live and we learn, and someday I will have the skills and the machine to make those beautiful sleeves, and they're gonna be glorious. So this is kind of an uninteresting pattern, but this is the kind of thing that I recommend that basically all cosplayers do if you're making your own stuff. This is a pattern for leggings, and I made this pattern off of a pair of leggings that I have that I like a lot. This is the leg, this is the waistband. They each have reminders to me on how to make this. When I make a pattern, something like this, that I know will be useful for not just this costume, but for future costumes, or even if I'm just making my own clothing in the future, I keep it, right? Like you keep that stuff and you'll save yourself so much time and heartache. So for this project, I needed leggings. So I went and I got my leggings pattern and I made a pair of leggings. These are made out of Yaya Han's stretch pleather. They have this little bit of thigh strip piecing detail that just adds a little bit of visual interest, but it's just a leggings with a waistband. Super, super easy. And these took very little time because I already had the pattern, and I can still say they're self-drafted because they are. I had just drafted that pattern for something else. The bra was not as easy to make. I wanted this to fit pretty specifically so that it wasn't super visible under my under the vest, because Draven doesn't wear anything under his vest, so I wanted this to be fairly hidden. But it's also made out of the Yaya Han stretch pleather, which I like a lot and don't find difficult to sew with. And then this is the belly portion. It just tucks into my leggings, and it's got a little bit of piping detail. This was one of the first things I made, and I definitely learned a ton about sewing between then and now. So I would definitely go back and remake this, make it more beautiful. Like, you can see here that I had to pull out a seam and it left holes in the pleather. If that had happened later in the project, I would have started over. But because this was so early and I was still learning, and I was still learning about how meticulous I wanted to be about this project, I left that in. So I would definitely remake this for sure. But it works, especially when it's ironed. So this is a piece that I'm glad I made, but they're almost impossible to see. Someday I'll have to get photos specifically of them. These are the calf wraps. They go between my leggings and my greaves. So again, for these, I use the saran wrap and masking tape method. Highly recommend. Use it for basically everything. This is what they look like. I love these. They fit perfectly, and they're really, really pretty. I love the top stitching. I love the texture of this pleather in particular. This is my favorite black pleather. Oh, here's a tip. Make sure you label all of your armor. I have a couple pieces like my greaves that aren't labeled, and every time we go to put the costume on, we agonize over which one is which. just write down which one it is. So this wraps around the back of the calf like this, and then connects in the front with purse snaps. Like I said, I like these a lot, but they are almost invisible when the costume is on, which is pretty sad, but hey, it's more practice with sewing with pleather, so I'll take it. Here's some little baby pieces. These are the bicep spikes. They wrap around the bicep like this at the top of the sleeves. Again, these are very clearly labeled left and this way is up because I knew I would be putting these on upside down. These are made with that same really nice black pleather. For these I used sew-on snaps. This snap connects it to the sleeve to keep it from rotating while wearing, and then there are also snaps that actually just close the thing. This layer right here is just, what is that, 6mm foam probably, and then these spikes again are 3D printed. These are super light and durable, don't have to worry about them, don't have to baby them, and they look pretty badass, to be honest. I like those. The stole was actually one of the more difficult things to pattern because I had no idea what it would look like flat. You know, this isn't, for me at least, this isn't the kind of garment that I have just laying around that I can look at how it's put together and modify it. I had to basically just experiment until I had this shape here, and then obviously it has a collar as well that attaches. So I made this out of white fur on top, really long pile stuff, that I like how it sticks up and adds some more visual interest. And then on the inside I have cream pleather. Adore this cream pleather. And then it too has some top stitch details. I had to do this because none of my pieces were big enough to cut the whole lining out of, but ultimately I think that's really pretty. I guess that's another thing where like you're never really gonna see the way this inside looks, but I think it's so beautiful and I'm glad I get to show it to you. And then there's the collar, just a regular collar sewn in. This attaches to my breastplate, not my breastplate, my vest with purse snaps. It looks warm, even though it's all fake, huh? So these are my bracers. These were made very similar to my greaves. The base is 4mm foam, again, labeled. Then the 4mm foam is covered in that wonderful black pleather that I love. For connecting foam to pleather, contact cement works really, really well, and it basically melds them together and makes them one material, so I really recommend that. And then we have the red velveteen detailing. This is sewn and then glued on with Fabri-Tac, which worked quite well. I like how you can still see a little bit of the edges here. And then of course the gold detailing with the 2mm and 4mm foam. Again, these are really delicate. Like you can see where I have crinkles here and the points have gotten a little beat up. A lot of that, again, a lot of that comes out with heat, but I hate having to worry about it. All of the strapping on this costume is made by hand. So I made strips of the brown pleather and put rivets in and put buckles on the other end. So you'll see that you may notice that that's the only attachment for this piece. I'm kind of proud of that. Like, this works like an actual piece of armor would. There's no Velcro or purse snaps on this. It just straps on your arm and then stays that way. It's pretty unrealistic in basically every other way, but one thing's cool. I guess I'm saving one of my favorite pieces for last here, and that is the vest. This is the pattern that I have for the vest. It's super, super basic, especially for one of the most complicated pieces that I made for the entire costume. This is about where the shoulder is right here, and then this is where the backs connect, and this is the center front where they are actually sewn together. And from this shape, I created my vest, which is also looking a little shapeless right now. This is all strip pieced and top stitched. I made it as clean as I possibly could with the skills that I have right now. So like this right here is like a working slide here that's lined, and there's no raw edges there, and these actually like move back and forth. It's lined with the red velveteen. I'm so proud of that. I love the pops of red like at the shoulders, under the sleeves. I think the collar went in really well. It has a zipper in the back, so it does fit over my head, but I was afraid once I had my taller wig on that I would mess up the styling in my wig by pulling it over my head, so I put a zip in it. Again, all of the strapping is made by hand. I sewed so many strips of brown pleather and red pleather and turquoise pleather and black pleather, and then working buckles. This buckles on just like the bracers do. The front dangly bits go on with sew-on snaps so that those are a little easier to get on. And again, the inside of this, I tried to make just as beautiful as the outside, especially since I knew the inside of this would be visible to a certain extent. So the ring on the back is just a big foam dowel. This is something that I would definitely remake as well, just because it has this foam dowel texture still and is not perfectly round. So I'd probably 3D print this, just like a flatter circle that you can't tell is a foam dowel. But this is like possibly the coolest thing I've ever made, to me. Maybe y'all will point to the axes and disagree, but I hope someday that everything I make I can feel as proud of as I am of this vest. So that's it. That is every piece of armor and garment and mustache for my Draven costume. If you'd like to see a breakdown of the axes, let me know, but I did do a pretty detailed slide tutorial about it on Instagram. I'll link that in the description if you'd like to see it. I hope this was helpful, or that I could keep you company today, and do the thing. Follow on Instagram, follow on YouTube, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.